stress, anxiety, burnout, these are issues that are not normally discussed in open forum, but they have a profound impact on our lives, our work, and our careers. A show of emotions is often perceived to be a sign of weakness. Mental health and well being is as important for us as other aspects of our life, and hence it also is important for our growth as human beings. By turning the spotlight on how to prevent burnout in a brave new world, stress, resilience, and beyond, AdGully attempts to highlight the ways in which we can face an uncertain future and turn it to our advantage. To chart the way forward today, we have two media and advertising industry veterans who have been there, done that, and laid the ground rules for new awakenings. They have reinvented themselves several times and have shown outstanding courage in the face of adversities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gowthaman Ragothaman, Chief Executive Officer, Aquiliz, and Vijay Bhatt, Founder Director, Cancer Awakens. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you. So Vijay, pleasure meeting you after a long time.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Yeah, it is it's an honor to talk to you about this particular topic. I think the context is set very nicely. But I thought before we can begin the session, there are a lot of words being used, isn't it? Stress, burnout, resilience. The terminologies can be very often abused and misused and wrongly used for any kind of a diagnosis as well.
Yes.
What's your view on this particular? It can be used as a device to interpret wrongly. You know what I mean? So, what's your view on this, Vijay? Are we right? Are we using the right word for the right situation, or is that guessing the wrong side of the story?
Since you mentioned, are we using the right word? If you'll allow me, G-Man, let me do one little activity.
Super.
Which involves all the participants.
Right.
So what I'm going to request Madhura to do is I'm going to request her to put the link in the chat box, and all the attendees who are there on our session today, my request to you is to please copy and paste that link that Madhura has put into the chat box. I'd like you to copy and paste that link into your browsers, and then I will tell you what I want to do. So since Gowthaman talked about the language that we are going to use, let me share my screen briefly. So if you put that link into your browser and click enter, it will take you to a screen where I want you to just take maybe 10-15 seconds, and I want each one of you to think about what has been your dominant emotion during the COVID lockdown. It's almost 3 months since the lockdown started, 25th of March. And so if you were to cast your mind back over these 3 months, I want you to come up with the most dominant emotion, one word only, and you can type it in and hit submit. And then you have the chance to do the same thing 2 more times. So each individual can put in 3 entries to capture your dominant emotions. I'm going to go to full screen and let's see what everyone is typing and what is the temperature of the room. Yeah, keep going. Please don't type in the chat box. Please type in the link. Typing in the chat box doesn't come up on the link. Yeah, keep going, guys.
Interesting.
Come on, I'm waiting for people to type in. And you don't have to come up with new words. It could be a word that somebody else has used before. If that is your emotion, then you can repeat that. Come on, this is an audience from media, advertising, PR, marketing. So I'm sure that it shouldn't take you so long. Keep going. Your top 3 emotions. Yeah, so I can see impermanence, uncertainty, redundancy, insecurity, worry, words like that. Also, you have 3 options. So if you type more than 3, then you will not be able to do more. So it's interesting what we are seeing, that the primary emotion seems to be that of uncertainty among our audience. But we are also seeing words of positivity, positive, hope, regeneration, glad, excitement, curiosity, excitement. Keep going. Maybe we'll run this for another 30 seconds. And I know some of you have typed your words into the chat if you haven't been able to do the thing on your browser for some reason. So I will read those out as well. So Bijoya has written frustration, insecurity, uncertainty, anxiety, fear. Those words are coming up. And of course, this is anonymous. So, nobody knows what particular emotions you've typed in. So please be forthright. Please be frank. Okay, somebody has also typed in fight back, empathy, bounced back. So, okay, another 10 seconds and then I'm going to lock the screen and let's move on. This is exciting, but we need to move on as well. So I'm going to lock the screen now. Thank you very much for participating in this. So we have uncertainty, health, excitement as the main ones, and then you have many of the others. So I think what is always interesting for me when I see something like this, when I see a word cloud like this, is that we are seeing both the negative emotions as well as we are seeing some of the positive emotions. So it's a complicated and a confusing time for us, because at one level we are rocked by the uncertainty, the shock. There is a sense of worry, insecurity. There are redundancies, etc., impermanence. But then there is also the other side of it, and how do we co-hold it in a very uncertain and in a very ambiguous time? Everyone talks about the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And right now it is VUCA into 100x. So you can imagine what's going on. So this is the reason I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and going back to the visual screen. This is the reason why just getting a sense of what people are thinking is useful for us to start. So now coming back to your question, Gowthaman, in terms of definitions, right? So nowadays we are using all these words so easily: stress and burnout and new normal and resilience and well-being and all that. So let me just clarify some of the definitions, right? So stress is a very basic concept, and stress has been there even before this crisis. So what is the definition of stress? Stress is simply a state when the pressures are greater than our coping mechanism. Each one of us has a coping mechanism, and each one of us feels pressure, and it's like a seesaw. If our coping mechanism is greater than the pressure, there is no stress. But if the pressure becomes higher than the coping mechanism, that is stress. So at a very simple level, that's the meaning of stress. Now, when you think about burnout, burnout is a relatively new word, and burnout is a form of extreme stress. So when I feel physically or emotionally exhausted, when I feel overwhelmed and I cannot deal with my daily demands, when my energy reserves are at a low, that is called burnout. So many of us can deal with kind of low grade, continuous, chronic stress, but burnout is a thing when we are reaching the end of our coping capacity. So that is burnout. Now, what is resilience? Since we are also talking about resilience. Resilience is a quality which has three different components to it, right? The first component is endurance. Can we absorb the shock? So maybe our endurance was tested over these 3 months to see whether we could actually deal with the shock. The second is that recovery. How do we bounce back from the shock? And some of us have already started bouncing back in terms of working from home, or some of us have started bouncing back in terms of maybe even going to work. And now the whole economy and the whole society and the whole planet is trying to bounce back in a way that is potentially different from the past. And the third, which most people don't talk about, but for me is very important, is that there is an element of transformation in resilience, which means that your future is going to be better than the past. And so resilience only makes sense when you have done all three, that there is an element of endurance, absorbing the shock. There's an element of bouncing back, which is recovering from the shock. And then there is an element of transformation, which is growing from the shock. So I guess the real challenge now that individuals and families and societies and organizations are facing is how many are going to transform, how many are going to actually grow from the experience. So I don't know if that is that at least sets the ground of what we are going to talk about in this session, Gowthaman.
Yeah, I think it's spot on, Vijay. So the way the word cloud came out sort of triggered a thought in my head.
Yeah.
Sometimes, or rather, I would rather, more often than not, I feel whether it is this burnout or the stress or any one of this, it's like a red pill moment, right? Till you ask a person, you might not even know what the person is going through. Take the example of the attendees today. Since you asked the question, they answered it back. Otherwise, they might not have even answered about whether they are feeling uncertain or whether they're feeling happy or sad or worried about it.
Yeah.
At what stage a person really knows that he is getting stressed out? Till somebody goes and asks them, right? I mean, it is sort of, it's also like a stigma. I don't want to know others to know that I'm stressed out, or nor will I ever go and say, hey, I'm burnt out today. So it's like it's not a positive thing to really talk about it as much as we talk about our achievements on social media. Nobody posts on a Facebook that he's stressed out today, if you notice. So do we need a Morpheus to tell a Neo that he is stressed out? Is it a red pill moment? So somebody has to give them a pill. You know what I mean?
Actually, it's not, Gowthaman. More than the red pill or blue pill. Nowadays, of course, blue pill has other implications. But I don't think it is a red pill or a blue pill moment. Actually, the story that comes to me is, the story of the frog in the boiling water. As they say that if you put a frog in water and you slowly heat up the water, the frog will never know that the temperature is changing until one fine moment when the water boils and the frog will die. So actually, stress is more of a creeping phenomenon rather than a binary phenomenon. And because it's a creeping phenomenon, it is actually hard to gauge. We are like the frog in that water. The water is becoming hotter and hotter, and we don't know that this thing is happening. But science has showed us that there are some very clear signposts that we ourselves can be aware of. For example, the number one signal of stress and obviously of burnout is poor sleep.
Right.
Now, I've been doing these workshops for lots of organizations around the world, as you know. And when I ask people for this question, which is to say, how is your sleep? Then a lot of people will put up their hands and say that my sleep is either poor or disturbed. So this is one very important signpost.
Right.
The second signpost is a sense of alienation, which is harder to spot. And this alienation comes up in terms of judging others and judging ourselves a lot rather than accepting and tolerating others and tolerating ourselves. So a certain kind of hostility and alienation comes in, and the WHO says this results in a certain kind of profound cynicism that people have about the world. And that is the precursor to a depressive condition. So that's the second, the alienation is the second part. And the third part is really the depletion of energy, which is that if normally I'm able to carry on in a productive way, let's say for 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours, then maybe in 4 hours or 6 hours, my energy tank starts to run low. I need more fuel in the tank.
Right.
So if you focus on these three areas, and this has been well proven, then you can yourself gauge your level of stress and your level of burnout. But as you say, it's not easy. So actually what we have done is we have created an online diagnostic where you can actually go and you can fill in a questionnaire and you can actually diagnose and uncover your own stressors. So that is our version of the red pill that you talked about.
Interesting. So this entire frog and the boiling water, the warm water, is a very good analogy. I think I can feel it. I can understand as it simmers up and you don't even know, it's almost subconsciously going into your head. I'm now going to sort of focus on the job side, professional side of it, not the personal side. I'll come to that in a minute. Something else running in my head as well. In a professional environment, in these times when, all of us have sort of gradually morphed into using Zoom calls like this for work from home, and all indications say that this is work from home is going to become an integral part of our work culture. Maybe 30% or 40% more time we're going to spend like this, where an employee and the subordinates or the seniors or the juniors or the peers are going to be virtual in a network like this. How much can we say the stress or a burnout can be due to the job itself and the employer or the ecosystem? So there are two reasons. There are two things in it. Somebody can be self-inflicting because they want to really do very well and they get stressed out or burnt out, or they might be really doing a good job, but the ecosystem or the organization is not really doing their bit of it. And in these times, it's going to become even worse in a virtual world. How is the system that can really manage this handshake? I mean, as a family, I will know my friend or my wife might just tell me that, hey, you're not looking good today. So, but nobody's going to tell us in the professional world. So how will you do it? Because somebody still has to tell that person to go and diagnose themselves. There's a job or an employer. Is there a balance in it?
Yeah. So it's a great question, Gowthaman. So we will talk about the individual dimension a little bit later, but all I will say at this moment is that there is a lot that the individual can do. And I don't think people are aware of what it is that we can actually do to manage our stress levels. We'll come to that. But since you talked about the organization, I actually think that the organization has a great responsibility and leaders have a great responsibility in this. Because in a way, if I'm the individual and I'm the frog, then my workspace is the container of hot water which is consistently heating up. Right. And so when you look at the research that is available, it has been well shown that there are 3 or 4 areas that contribute a lot to people's stress from the organizational standpoint. The first one is that when unreasonable demands are placed upon people, and the unreasonable demands can be either in terms of shorter times or greater workload. So a combination of greater workload and shorter time, which is now becoming the norm, is one reason why people start to feel the stress, and organizations obviously have to look at this. The second is the lack of role clarity. And again, when everyone's working from home, the lines are blurred. I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing, what somebody else is doing. So lack of role clarity is going to go up rather than go down. So I guess organizations have to be mindful of that so that people know what is expected of them and what is not expected of them. The third is, if there is a lack of communication from their leaders. And so, the old adage goes that in good times you must communicate, in a crisis you must communicate 5 times as much.
Yeah.
So right now, I guess, people will be looking for compassionate and courageous communication from their leaders so that they know where they stand. If there is too much ambiguity and there is no communication, then people start spinning a lot of stories. And, we in the advertising marketing business are great at spinning stories. And we can spin all kinds of stories if we don't watch out. The fourth, which is a very serious one, is unfair treatment. So what happens is that in an environment, if people start to perceive that there is either nepotism or favoritism or any kind of ism, some kind of political situation that is playing out, and therefore there is inequity or unfairness in the system, then the stress absolutely shoots up.
Yeah.
So, and the last is that when people feel that there is a lack of resources, which is you're asking me to do more in less time without communicating too much, and you're not giving me the resources I need because everyone is resource strapped. So we now begin to see how this becomes like we are getting wound up tighter and tighter and tighter. And I believe that organizations and leaders have a big role to play. I'm sorry to say that our industry does not do a very good job of this.
Right.
Since I was in the industry and since I now work with many companies in the industry, there are some of my clients, and some of my clients who have done a lot in this space. But I would say that is by far the exception rather than the rule. What most companies say is that, yes, people are our biggest assets, but we don't actually do enough to empower our people. Now, there's a very famous research which shows that the level of creativity in a stressed out team is somewhere between 18 to 24% lower than in a team that is not stressed out.
Right.
So now, if creativity is the lifeblood of our industry, and we are letting stress levels go to that extent, then we are compromising, we are in a way cutting the branch that we are sitting on. I mean, think about it, right? If Ravi Shankar has to create, he's not going to create from a stressed out environment.
Okay. Yeah.
He's going to go to stillness and then create. But in our industry, we've made it fashionable. Think about the night before a pitch.
Oh, yes.
Right? When the stress levels is high, even in the best of times.
Yeah.
How is it possible for us to be at our creative best in that kind of environment? So I really believe that organizations need to do more. And particularly in our industry, my request to all my old friends who are now chairmen and founders and CEOs of your organizations is please take this seriously. And, the good news is, Gowthaman, $1 invested in this returns $4 in productivity.
Yeah, totally. I know what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. But Vijay, so I'm going to wear another hat to push you back on this. Okay, so
sure.
I've been a CEO and I've run a couple of regions and offices, and the typical response, which sometimes I could relate to, is that a lot is also a function of an individual's discipline.
Yes.
Right. So while the organizations can do what they can do to get to what you're talking about, including, let's say, even a couple of dollars more than that's being spent on it, there is no control. I mean, this I've heard it in many of the appraisals I've sat with my P team and my teams, others as well. That look, what can I do if he goes out, he or she goes out, and I don't know what they do after the work hours, and it's not in our control.
Yeah.
If they're not disciplined about it, they're getting stressed out or burnt out because of that, I'm helpless. So there is a sense of helplessness in the organization, which I think it's equally important to sort of put it onto the table. So because I've been a candidate getting stressed out, and I've also been a candidate on the other side trying to sort this problem out, so I can empathize on both the sides. So this discipline is a very tough one. It's a very soft attribute. Any of your thoughts on after night party hours to binge parties to nowadays you have to watch binge shows as well. You get into a show and you see through for 5 episodes, and you have to have some kind of control of the time.
Yeah, I actually believe, Gowthaman, you're absolutely right that both the individual component and the organizational component have to come together, right? And it's not enough for organizations to create the environment if the individuals don't do their part. In the same way, it's not enough for the individuals to do their part and feel responsible, but the organization simply keeps on increasing the pressure. So this can only happen when there is a true conversation between them. Now, at the individual level, you mentioned discipline. Yes, discipline is very important, but in my view, discipline follows awareness. And so actually in my book, what I'm noticing about people is that there is lack of awareness about this issue to begin with. So my work actually involves in helping people to become more aware and to say that, look, having 3 single malts may be a temporary stress buster, but it's actually not going to serve you in the long run.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're able to get people to be aware, and the good news is, for example, that young people today are much more physically active than we were, because there is a gymming culture, there is a jogging culture, there is a Zumba culture, there is a yoga culture, all of that. So to me, that is a good sign. But again, there the awareness is such that we mostly only think about the physical aspect. Right? We think about diet, we think about sleep, we think about exercise, but we don't think in a holistic manner. Now, you, Gowthaman, or I, Vijay, or anybody else who's on this show is a whole person. There is a physical side to them. There is an emotional side to them. There is a mental side to them. There is a relationship side to them. And there is even a spiritual side to them. So again, what research shows is that if you want to really deal with your stressors, you must deal with yourself at this holistic level. Now, bad news is people are not aware of it. Good news is there are lots of practitioners. Now, you live in Singapore and I live in Mumbai. I can tell you that both in Singapore and in Mumbai, there are amazing experts, there are amazing practitioners, there are amazing workshops. If only people are aware of it and go and try it out once or twice, I think actually people will put their health first. So to me, individual commitment is very important, but discipline will follow. Awareness has to lead the way.
I know what you're saying. I think it is more, it comes back to self-realization of an attempt that individual has to make to really overcome some of these issues. So I'm going back to the word cloud now. So there were 2 forces at play there. There is at one side an excitement and an uncertainty. I think that so there are 2 words which struck my head into it. So and you also talked about stress and burnout, and we sort of had some definitions as well. So is stress a precursor to a burnout? Well, what I mean is that burnout happens only after a person is stressed out. Because, for example, there are people who are feeling excited about opportunities during the post-COVID world. And they might be just depleting the resources much faster instead of conserving it, and just go, wow, I got an opportunity, bang, 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 bang. And suddenly realize that things are not happening as per the returns because the industry system has to move. And they might get depleting the resources first, get stressed out, and then realize that they have burnt out when the timing is just not arrived. Is it a sequence, or is it there are people who get burnt out without getting stressed out, or am I reading too much into those 2 words?
No, and broadly speaking, you're right, which is that burnout is, as I said, an extreme form of stress. So you need to get stressed, and slowly over a period of time, like the boiling frog, you reach a point and suddenly some small thing may happen, something really small may happen, and then you crash. That is typically the path of the burnout. If somebody gets a devastating shock suddenly, let's say, you're diagnosed with a serious illness, or one fine day you're made redundant, and then you have that is not called a burnout. That is called a trauma.
Got it.
Because what has happened there is that you haven't really prepared for this thing. It suddenly come out of the blue. And so that would be called a crisis or a trauma. But in general terms, you're right that it starts with low-grade stress, like low-grade fever. And then it just keeps getting worse, and it starts getting more and more complicated and complex until finally you reach a kind of a dead end, and then you crash. That is a burnout.
Yeah, this has been really putting me into this question ever since this post-COVID preparations. I hear quite a few people talk about opportunities and missed opportunities, and I'm also seeing people running to solve a problem in these times. For example, the entire world of entertainment, telemedicine, education, are all seeing this as opportunities to grow, grab eyeballs, or grab and trying to work over time to see this opportunity. And there are people who are actually at state of despair to say, I don't have an opportunity, I've missed out or something like that. So you have done a lot of workshops on this, and I've been a person who has attended some of your workshops as well, and some of them are cathartic enough to really explode me, and then I calm down to feel the situation. I know you know what I mean. So and there are people who can jump into a situation of quickly going for a prescription drug, like take a paracetamol or take a sleeping pill, or when you say when you ask the question about are you sleeping or not, and you can get it in India or in Singapore or any other part of the world, an antidepressant, or these are short-term options available. But sometimes you go to the doc also says it's okay if you take once in a while. But this entire, you know about yoga, you're talking about other workouts and sessions. There's no one answer. I'm not putting you in a fix to choose one, but can you just elaborate about this process about when can I choose a sleeping pill to go to sleep and say, okay, fine, I know I'm stressed out, and let me just at least take a break and come back? Or when can I really say, okay, I need to go for a regimen? Or I have some experiences, but I thought I will hear you out on this, because that is important for the attendees as well to know.
So I think there are two parts to your question. And so I want to break them up into two parts and then answer them separately. The first is, you asked the question about people who are trying to rush into the opportunity that this disruption has created. And in a way becoming opportunistic in that. And that itself can be very difficult. It can lead to stress and burnout and so on, because you're actually trying to be opportunistic in that moment, right? I mean, to that point, I would say that the way I see it is that right now we are not just going through a temporary disruption. In other words, this is not a bump in the road. This is a structural disruption. This is a fork in the road. And the distinction between a bump in the road and a fork in the road is that the bump in the road will be behind you until you come to the next speed breaker or until you come to the next pothole. But a fork in the road means that you have to change your direction. You have to change your priorities quite fundamentally. And that usually does not happen in a rush. So the way I see it is that, of course, there will be a few people who will make hay when the sun shines. And that's fine. But I think the entire planet and the entire business model of capitalism as we know it has come to a turning point. It's a fork in the road. And actually leaders in all industries, and certainly in our industry, have to really be able to look ahead at this time and not be short term. And this is a challenge because you have to fly the plane and fix it at the same time. Right? And this is where it becomes very stressful for the leaders. Now, again, we know from research that 100% of CEOs have at least one stress-related ailment. And 70% have at least two and are taking medication for it. So that brings me to the next point, which is about medication, which you asked about, right? So we have a plethora of possibilities. You have a lot of things that you can do. The issue with medications is that it fixes the symptom temporarily,
Right.
and it gives you therefore temporary relief. And so there is no problem in medication or medicine or any other kind of intervention which for an acute problem you need to take. That is appropriate to take. But that will not solve the deeper rooted or the chronic issue, which has to do with your overall sense of health and lifestyle and well-being. So the way I see it is that your regimen, your health regimen is the foundation. And if that is going well, then occasionally when something goes wrong or you have a dip or you need a boost, it's fine to take the short-term pill.
Right.
So again, I see that both have a role to play, but obviously I would always give much more importance, given my own health and cancer background and so on, to say, keep the foundation very strong, keep the foundation in your control, tailor it for your needs, and then as required, you go to a practitioner, whether it's a medical doctor or a homeopath or a hypnotherapist or a yoga teacher or a dance teacher or a gym.
Right.
That is something that you can do over and above managing yourself. I hope that answers both sides of your question.
It gives a sense, because I think it's I've got got a sense of what I should be acting on, but I think it's even for the attendees, they know how to make a choice, because it is for them when they realize a situation, what to choose. That it's whether it is a short-term medication or a regimen, or it's something which I think it is important to recognize and choose. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of questions, Vijay. I'm going to pick up two of them.
Yes.
We have time, but we can just go around some of these topics as well. One is a very industry-specific question, focusing on creative industry. It's about, would you agree that not knowing how to measure creative productivity is the reason for long hours mean you are working harder? I think it's just not in creative productivity. Wherever industry is charging on man hours today, the procurement teams from the client has the same question, that how do I know that you have put the optimal hours to work on this project, and when are you jipping me by just stretching your time? It's an interesting question. I just thought I'll hear you out, because you are discussing, you're meeting clients and the agencies and all the partners as well. So, and it's got a link to stress as well, and burnout, because when the organization chases this man, it's a vicious circle, and then you drive a company to a particular point of the entire team getting burnt out. I've seen it.
Yeah. So the way I look at it, and fortunately or unfortunately, I left the full-time advertising business now many years ago, and at that time, this issue of productivity and procurement, etc., was not such a big one. It was there, it was coming in. And so I must say that I have faced it more now in my consultant career more than in my advertising career. But what I will say is this, that I think that most clients understand that there is a certain basic level of productivity that is necessary. That means the engine has to be ticking and the car has to be running. And a certain throughput and an output is demanded of us. I don't think anybody will dispute that. And so to my mind, the way the fee structures are calculated, they are usually calculated for that, which is keep the throughput, keep the output, keep the engine ticking, keep my visibility, keep my awareness going, etc. But what the advertising industry does best is, beyond that, is to come up with those inspired and breakthrough ideas.
Right.
And those inspired and breakthrough ideas, invaluable. They change everything.
Yeah.
Right? That cannot be put into the same box as the engine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in my view, when we are thinking about creative productivity, I think we are making a mistake if we apply the same rules for both types of work. I think we need to apply a much more engineering or accounting or left-brained approach to the daily work, the throughput-based work. And we need to put a different measure for the inspiring breakthrough kind of ideas. Now, in my own experience, when I ran the Unilever account, even in those days, Unilever did this very well. Their agency evaluation system, as you know very well, has a basic level where you are expected to deliver what you're supposed to deliver. And then there is a booster. And that booster is for the breakthrough, the innovation, the stuff that you do, which is over and above, beyond the call of duty. So to me, that is generally a good model to look at creative output and creative productivity. Now, of course, as I said, my view is a little bit old, so maybe things have changed now, but this is how I would look at it.
Okay. I think it's not changed yet, Vijay, from what I know. I'm also leaving. I've left it a year back, so it's 1 year old, but yes, it is still lots to fix. And there are good samples and there are bad examples as well. So yeah, so I think there are 3 or 4 good questions is popping out. So I'm just going to sequence it so that we can conclude it at the right time. Another good one is how can the industry find a balance between a free and wild creative culture and a very responsible way to live that freedom?
Can you say that again, please? I lost a little bit there.
How can the media industry, our industry, find the balance between a free and wild creative? That's your right of way, because that's why you joined the industry. I'm ought to be free and wild, and a responsible way to live that freedom. It's tough, but I've seen some people who have really cracked it, and I've seen some people who have really gotten cracked as well. So what's your advice and view for them?
Yeah, our industry likes to operate at the extremes, and our industry likes to think in this binary way. But as we grow older, Gowthaman, you have more white hair than I do. But as as we grow older, we know that the sweet spot lies in between, right? And that sweet spot is very hard to find. And that requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires a lot of experimentation. It requires a lot of moderation and modulation. So my answer to this is to say that just like in our business, we would say that, at least in Ogilvy, we used to say that in order to get the best creative product, you need a very tight brief. So without a tight brief, you will not get that breakthrough. So now you could argue and say, but hey, hang on. That means that, there are a lot of constraints, that the guardrails that are put in order for a breakthrough solution. How does that work? So to my mind, it is exactly the same thing, which is, I believe it's important for us to figure out our own guardrails in this whole area of productivity, in terms of well-being, and in terms of our regimen and so on. But we must not make those guardrails into inviolate rules or a cage. So how do we turn, and as when you run a business, you have certain financial guardrails. But those guardrails are not going to be a cage and a constraint, because if you let them be that, then you have hurt yourself, you've damaged yourself. So I would say that there is no easy answer to this. It comes with experience, it comes with maturity, that the guardrails are important, the guidelines are important, but the freedom is really what people hire us for. The breakthroughs are what people hire us for. So how do we find that creative tension between the two? Between, say, art and commerce on one side, between, say, discipline and freedom on another side, right? Between, say, logic and magic, which is the program that I run. How do you find that sweet spot really becomes the way that leaders grow, and people who do it better will grow faster and become leaders faster than others, is my view.
Superb. You touched Ogilvy, so I went back in my memories to the Ogilvy days. We used to have this happiness corridor, and in most of in those times, then when you really want to express yourself, you can just go and stand in one place and laugh your heart out. I've done it in the Chennai office many years back. So companies can do, organizations do something like this for their own organization. But there's one question that's coming here about, as an industry, can we create a platform for expression? And it's almost like a safe house, where you allow the people to express themselves, because ours is a very connected network of industries. We don't live on our own self, whether it is creative or media. We have to work with publication houses, broadcasters, digital companies. So we are all interdependent with each other. As an ecosystem, is there a way in which we can form some kind of a, it's a very good question. I think my heart is towards that. That's why I thought I will ask you, is there a way, I'm taking as an opportunity as well, that we can do something for creating a safe house expression for employees? Your views. I'll talk more on that.
So let me respond to that by saying that I'd like to look at it at multiple levels. My first question to every individual is, do you have a safe house inside of you? Where you feel free to be authentic and you can express yourself to yourself first. That's the first thing. The second is, in your team or in your organization, can you create that safe space? You mentioned Ogilvy and this whole thing about, laughter in the hallways. So that was part of the Ogilvy culture. So I guess to organizations and to leaders, I would say, how are you creating a culture where there is psychological and cultural safety, where people can express themselves without fear of being reprimanded, or without fear of being judged, or without fear of being punished, obviously within reasonable bounds. So that's the second part. The third part is that at an industry level, since that was the question, I was on the Ad Club Mumbai managing committee, I don't know, many years ago. This was even before, in fact, this was the year when the Abbeys were invented, right? I think it must have been in the early 90s or something like that. Now, at that time, the Ad Club and industry bodies were meant to be the safe space.
Right.
That's why they were set up.
Yeah.
They were not set up to be competitive advertising shows.
Right.
They were set up to be industry forums where people could leave aside their competition, could leave aside the stresses, and come and really look at issues that affect the industry so that together we could move them forward. And so for me,
I think it's a good point.
For me, I asked the question, why aren't the industry organizations the safe spaces that they were set up to be? We don't need to set up a new space. We already have them. We have to make them safer.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I've seen that as a huge opportunity for those who are listening to this this program, including, AdGully can also take the initiative on this. But if the industry, in any of those industry bodies, can take this initiative to find, because I'll tell you, Vijay, why this thought came to my head. There are occasions when I was running it in India, often a particular space seller used to get stressed out because somebody was giving them meeting time but not concluding something, right?
Yeah.
So he kept going for a meeting and there is no conclusion, and he didn't know where to escalate the situation. And this, I'm just giving you an example. I've heard of many such situations where, as the organization goes down in terms of in the levels of where the basic implementation happens, there are a lot of such unheard of, unmentionables that stresses the people, which doesn't come up.
Yeah.
And I think we need it in our system, because in these times, some of my personal friends I see, whenever I meet them, ask them, why are you looking so stressed out? It's because it's not about standard questions like urgent versus important. Those are good to have charts, but if you have to really practice something, I think we have to give an opportunity for the people in the ecosystem to express themselves in a safe environment. That's my view. And I think one of the questions is exactly in that order, to say, what do you do when you don't know the right answer? You have to go and ask someone. And if you don't want to ask your boss, or you want to go and ask your peer at the other side of the ecosystem, how do you do?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that, and this is one of the great positive things that I believe has happened in our industry since I was in it. In my time, we didn't really have an HR function, for example.
Yeah.
The office head or the discipline head was also the HR head, and the finance head used to decide how much salary can be paid or not be paid, right?
Yes.
But as I grew in the organization, the industry started to look at the HR function and the people function better and in a more systematic way. I suspect, again, what has taken place is that in our industry, in a majority of cases, the HR function has become an administrative function. It looks at hiring, it looks at packages, it looks at onboarding, it looks at induction, it may look at appraisals and so on. But it has not really become the voice of the employees within the organization.
Right.
And so I believe that the HR function in our industry has a role and an obligation to be the voice of the employee in the organization. And essentially what you're talking about is that if people feel that it is safe to go and express their needs, let's say we were just talking about, say, unfair treatment, or you're talking about overload of work, or if you're talking about any of these things which create stress, or for example, if there is unconscious bias in terms of gender or in terms of, anything,
Right.
If I don't feel that I have a safe place to go and talk about this, if I don't feel that I can go and blow a whistle when a whistle blowing is required, then it is going to create a toxic culture within the company and within the industry. So I believe, again, that while the industry has taken a great step forward in creating the HR function, I believe that one of the areas of that HR function which is neglected is this very simple one. How am I becoming a true and authentic voice of the employee in my organization? And if people trust the HR person or the HR function to do this, then that is the internal safe space.
Yeah, so that's a good question from someone on the same topic. What scope does a psychologist have in today's marketing and advertising corporate world? Do HR team also have to have some psychologists with them, or they need to be aware of this understanding employee psychology? It's a good question. Yeah.
It's a great question. And the way I would look at it is to say that if you really bring a professional psychologist and put them on the staff, they're going to get bored very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
True.
So the way it works is that not only HR, in my view, all leaders need to have a good understanding of human psychology, because that is the only way in which you are going to get the best out of your team and out of your peers. And if we think that all we are is advertising people and we don't have to really learn about other people and how to get the best out of them and ourselves, then we are not going to be very effective leaders. So there are some basic issues about human nature, what motivates us and so on, which all leaders need to know. Right. Over and above that, the HR group may need to also know a little bit about things like psychometric testing, or some of the methodologies that are out there which are based on psychology. They are psychology applications rather than psychology per se. Right. So I would say that the HR department, for example, needs to understand those psychology applications. And then when there are specific issues, like in my case, when I was diagnosed with cancer and I had my surgery, Ogilvy had a psychologist on retainer. His name is Bill Mitchell in London. Right. And I was entitled to go and get sessions with Bill because I needed it at that point in time. So again, I think it requires a calibrated approach. All leaders need to understand human nature. If we can understand consumer psychology, hey, why can't we understand employee psychology? HR people need to understand the psychology applications. And then as required, you may keep a clinical psychologist on retainer to deal with, the extreme cases that are required. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, got it. Absolutely. So I'm just going to go to some lighter vein, some question, Vijay. So see, in Singapore, we are spoiled it, like with nothing, everything is on time, right? So I know exactly at any time of the day that it takes 10 minutes to go to Marina Bay Sands from my house.
Yeah.
Whereas in these times, apparently in Mumbai and in Bangalore, from the both cities very well, there is no traffic. You can go for a client meeting in half the time that you used to take earlier. So, does it lead to better productivity, or it leads to better time management? Or, I mean, there's a joke going on. I mean, people in Bangalore used to call me and say, it takes hour and a half to 2 hours, and you still don't know whether you're going to have the meeting or not.
Yeah.
And so is the case in Mumbai. And these times the commuting time has really significantly come down.
Yeah.
Is it helping productivity, or it's going to be fun times? So,
I believe that we should enjoy the additional time that is getting created.
Yeah.
I don't think this extended time is going to last for very long, frankly. Because just like work expands to fill the time, traffic expands to fill the roads.
True. I think it is back in action today. Some of the cities.
So the way I look at it is that look at this as a nice bonus time that is being given to us. Yeah. And what can we do in that bonus time? Some of us might use it productively. Some of it might sit in front of Netflix for a while. Some of us might play with our children or with our pets or whatever it is. So I look at it and say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Just enjoy it while it lasts, right? Because it's soon going to go back to the, creepy crawly traffic of Bangalore and Mumbai.
Okay, so one last question, and I can leave it to you to sort of conclude this session as well, Vijay. So it's about, in these times, I was speaking to one of the CFO, and he said, Jim, and travel is all slashed. It's not going to come back, the travel budget. Yeah. There are no conferences that's going to be there for a good long time, and everybody is going to just go back. And so even the budget is going to be reset for the new normal, right? Yeah. In these times, equally, whatever we are talking about here today is an important topic, whether it is psychologist or the safe house or all these investments. Is it a luxury to have somebody like a chief culture officer in an organization, it is not going to add any revenue to you? I mean, in these times, everybody will jump into show me the money. So how important is something like a role in an organization as an investment in these times? And then I leave it to you to conclude as well.
I believe that a chief culture officer or a chief talent officer or whatever the fashionable designation is, I believe that role is very, very critical, certainly in our industry. Because the way I see it is that if people are together all the time, like we used to be, then whether you like it or not, a culture will form. Right? And then it's a question of harnessing and channeling that culture so that it becomes unique to the organization and it serves the organization's vision and agenda and strategy and so on, right? In the new world, when we are going to have a lot more gig economy, we are going to have a lot more virtual, we are going to have a lot more work from home, the distances are going to be greater between people. And so therefore, creating the cultural glue, the importance of that is not going to go away. It may, in fact, only increase. The nature of how that is done will be different because you may have to use technological platforms a lot more. You may have to use different technologies to do so. So in my mind, the role is not going to be less important. The role is going to be more important. But you will need a very forward-thinking person to do this role, because if you have an old-fashioned person trying to do this role when everything has changed, that person will fall flat on his or her face. So I don't think the role will go away. And with regard to travel, my feeling is that humans are social beings. We will start traveling at some point in time. We will start taking the risks because let's face it, COVID is not going to go away. We are going to all get it someday or the other. And we will all learn to live with it. So in my view, the way the reactions are going on right now, yes, we have to take it very seriously. We must not do anything foolhardy. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't see travel coming to an end, or I don't see creative meetings or brainstormings coming to an end. I don't see conferences coming to an end. They will morph, but they will still be there is my reading.
Thank you, Vijay. I think it's best that you sort of summarize this because you're very good at it. But I can say from myself, after discussing with you some of these things, and we were preparing it as well, so I got a head start in thinking about it. My view is that, I mean, personally, I will make an attempt to reach out to a safe house if there is a situation. I think I want to make an attempt to feel comfortable to reach out, because that's the starting point to overcome stress or burnout or any of these negative thoughts in our head. That's my only key learning I'll take, is to reach out, find someone to express yourself so that you can get out of the pressure cooker. So over to you, Vijay. So any views? Yeah.
I mean, the last thing, the tip that I would like to leave behind with the audience today is a very simple one. It's like this. If you think about your vehicle, your car or two-wheeler or whatever it is that you drive, if you don't have a checkup, you can't have a tune-up.
Absolutely.
Right. And so my tip for people is, we diagnose so many things, we check out so many things, we do all kinds of tests medically, this, that, and the other, but we don't do anything in terms of giving ourselves a checkup occasionally. And I mean, when I say ourselves, I mean at all levels: physical, emotional, mental, relational, spiritual. So I would say to people that if you do this diagnosis, and we offer this questionnaire free on our website, it's called the Holistic Health Questionnaire. I would urge everyone who is on this webinar, or everyone who is going to see the video of this webinar, to at least do that diagnostic. It takes 30 minutes to do. And then you can have a clearer sense of what stressors do you really need to work on and how you need to work on them. Otherwise, you will again make a generalized assumption and find a generalized solution which may not work for you.
Right, absolutely.
So that would be my tip, which is do the checkup and then do the tune-up.
Absolutely. I think we're good an hour we have spent on this, Vijay. I hope everybody learned and enjoyed this. It itself is an opportunity to sort of spend some time to think about ourselves, to go for a checkup internally. Thanks a lot for giving me an opportunity to talk to you. We keep chatting on WhatsApp, but this is much better on a topic which is good for the industry. And I must thank AdGully for asking me to talk to you about it. And over to you to conclude it. Is anybody there to do it?
Yeah, so Ganpati, would you like to close out the session, or is there something else you want to ask?
There is nothing much to ask, but what I would like to say is I would like to thank both of you for giving us this opportunity to talk to the audience. Very interesting discussions and a lot of learnings. And I'm sure that many of them in this gathering would have certainly picked up certain tips, and they will try and use it in the real life. There is no end to this sessions. We can keep on continuing, but unless one practices and follows and brings in a lot of self-discipline, it will take some time for you to counter stress. Stress is a very, very general and very subjective word, but you need to focus on that and take certain direction to de-stress yourself.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for this.
Thank you, Gowthaman. Thank you, Ganpati. And a big thank you to Bijoya and Shanta for hosting and giving us this platform. I hope you and your audience got some value out of it. Thank you.
Certainly,
Bye-bye.
certainly. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.